Fun fact, you couldn't really just DoorDash food to your igloo or your cave. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sam. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. I'm so happy to have you here with me again this week. If you are new here and this is the first time you are seeing my face, welcome. I make weekly videos dissecting internet nonsense, so if you're into that type of thing or you like today's video, I hope that you'll consider liking and subscribing. It really helps out the channel and make sure that you never miss another upload from me. So it's been a little while since I got to utilize my little history nerd brain for the channel. And you guys know I really love doing those historical deep dives. But until now, I hadn't really had a good topic to really express that part of my brain until today. For any of you who don't know, I have a bachelor's degree in history. It's something that I just really love getting to deep dive into. And like I said, I don't get to do it very often, but when I do, it's a lot of fun. And for some reason, fat activists really love clinging to historical artifacts or figures to kind of prove their point that fatness used to be an ideal body or beauty standard. And so today we're going to look at one of those artifacts. So what exactly are we going to be talking about? Well, I stumbled across a TikToker this weekend who she's doing some sort of series about promoting obesity, which is just annoying. But within that, she shared this clip.
My second favorite thing about being fat is the curves of my body. This is a Venus figurine dating back to the Paleolithic era, depicting the ideal feminine. Bitch, I look like that.
Also, before we get in too deep to the historical part of this thing, I just have to, you guys, I can't even make this up. This TikToker on her page, these two TikToks literally exist right next to each other. Let me just show you this clip.
Not to get all woo-woo and like deep, because I'm very comfortable with the fact that I know barely anything.
Glad she's at least willing to admit that she doesn't know anything. Maybe she'll learn something today. Okay, so the figurine that she showed in her clip in that TikTok is known as Venus of Willendorf, and she is approximately 25,000 to 30,000 years old. She's 4.4 inches or 11.1 centimeters tall and was found in Austria, though she is believed to have originated in either Italy or Ukraine based on the type of limestone material she was sculpted from. This isn't the first time that we've seen fat acceptance kind of latch on to historical artifacts, or even the idea of Venus promoting that fatness was more acceptable at some point in history. Most notably, we saw that when we covered Fearing the Black Body here on the channel. But I find it interesting that even Dr. Strings did not touch this piece. Like, she didn't even get close to it. And that very well could be because Venus of Willendorf is a prehistoric artifact. And for anyone who doesn't know, prehistoric just means that the piece existed before we had written records. So prehistory is pre-written record. History is once we have written record in the field. Because of the lack of written record, prehistorians tend to work a lot with theories. And the truth is, that's really all they have to go off of, because there's nothing written firsthand from those time periods, right? There's no booklet that comes with these figurines saying precisely what they were used for or why they were carved. So let's actually walk through some of those theories related to the Venus of Willendorf and talk through why it's absolutely nonsensical for fat activists to hold on to this figurine, this piece of the past, to try to make their argument that at one point in time fatness was desirable. First, let's discuss their fixation on this one figurine. What they always fail to mention are that there are more than 200 of these figurines, and they have been discovered all throughout Europe and Asia. While they do mostly depict women, There are statues of males as well as human-animal hybrids. Additionally, they are not all fat. Some are tall and slender. Many do not have heads. Many don't have feet. And historians think that each figure was sculpted with purpose and intention, and that the shapes were not created from a lack of skill. The reason it's important to note this is that it's not really possible to know whether or not this depicted fatness as an ideal body type, right? Because if they were indeed basing these off of body types, we've just heard that there were a whole bunch of them, but there were also human-animal hybrids, so maybe they're not based on reality at all. Let's look at why this is so hard to nail down. Let's start by looking at the period in time in which these figurines would have come to exist. At the point of filming this video, it is theorized that these were utilized by peoples called the Gravettians. These hunter-gatherers lived during a bitterly cold period in Europe. Those residing in Western Europe tended to live in caves, while those in Eastern Europe tended to live in open-air camps or sites and are known mammoth hunters. They were nomadic in nature, moving around Europe before agricultural societies really existed. If these figurines depicted what women actually looked like, it might make sense that they'd try to put on extra weight due to the bitter cold, but also if they were pregnant or focused on fertility. There was probably an emphasis on making sure they had extra weight stores on their body to keep them alive and keep their babies healthy until their next meal. But there is not evidence that this is what women looked like during these time periods. Scientists recently did bone comparisons of prehistoric women and discovered that they would resemble female athletes today in their bone density and potential muscle mass, which makes sense since these women would be moving with the men to hunt and were likely charged with using the heavy hides to make clothing, gathering plants, and assisting when they did finally begin to farm. When you start to put these theories into perspective and start to build context around the time period of which they survive, it makes sense that these actually might not be a depiction of what those people looked like, but rather they probably had something to do with sex and fertility. Another recent study looked at the end of the era in which the Gravettians would have survived and noted that there was a sharp increase in population growth during that time period. Women were bearing approximately 8 to 10 children apiece, which is crazy when you realize that their average lifespan was about 25 to 30 years old. So now let's talk about why it's nonsensical for fat activists today to be holding on to this figurine as some sort of idol of the past. First and foremost, our fat activists who are holding on to this piece for dear life are not living in a nomadic hunter-gatherer society. We are living in a society where literally everything can be handed to you in a moment. We live with so much surplus. There is never a need to worry about where food is going to come from. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that there aren't people in the world who deal with hunger issues. What I'm saying is I don't think that those people are fat activists who are on TikTok holding on to this figurine. I mean, fun fact, you couldn't really just DoorDash food to your igloo or your cave, right? We are so far removed from what it would have been like to live as a hunter-gatherer, let alone to live in freezing temperatures. There would be no need for us to look that way now, even if at some point that was the ideal body size. But let's flip this and say that, okay, what if this is actually what women looked like, even though they were muscular and also had some bone density? It's more likely that they would have had very swollen bodies, because I can't get too graphic here on YouTube, due to the fact that they were each bearing around 8 to 10 children. Again, to put that into perspective, each of these women was popping out 8 to 10 babies, and they were only living to about 25 or 30 years old, which means they were pregnant for most of their short lifespan. We know this because historians actually found that during this time period, it was possible for women to produce more children because they actually weaned their babies using baby food made from gruel and milk that was fed to them using small stone spoons. That use of baby food meant that others could help care for the baby while the mother was pregnant again and caring for herself to keep her unborn, healthy. I don't know about you out there, but like that does not sound appealing to me at all. Idolizing the way that these women lived is just so strange to me. Like, these women were not doted upon. They weren't getting overweight from being sedentary and being fed grapes by the men, like, while they were popping out these children, right? They were actively pregnant for most of their lives while moving around Europe in the freezing cold and continuously setting up new camps. Like that, it doesn't sound fun. In my humble opinion, after reading some of these theories and kind of piecemealing some of this together, it seems more likely than not that this had nothing to do with depicting the ideal body at all. But it probably did have something to maybe do with fertility, the way we think of Venus, the goddess, for which this figurine is named. Now, I want to switch gears to talk about the nonsensical nature of them holding onto this figurine as some sort of relic of past ideal beauty standards, right? Because that's most often what we hear them saying. Look at this statue. It shows that at one point fat women were the most desirable. And I think I find that so interesting because they're so anti-beauty standard as a part of the fat acceptance movement. Even that first creator that you saw says this in another one of her TikToks.
If human beings have a purpose, and that's a very skeptical if, it is not to be beautiful. I think that would be like, I was going to say low down on the list, but I don't think it would even be on the list.
And by this point, we also know that Tess Holliday's whole brand is F your beauty standards, right? Even though she fits most beauty standards except for being fat. I also find it so interesting that these women in the fat activist movement who are often leading very feminist, like pro-feminist talking points are holding on to these figurines that so overtly reduce women to their sexual organs, right? If we go back and we look at some of these figurines, they often depict women only for those characteristics. They often do not have heads, and if they do, they're faceless. And remember that historians noted that these figurines were created with intention and purpose. Why would they not have faces or hair or really any other features outside of those specific organs? Even with the Venus of Willendorf herself, she has a head, but appears to be looking down with some sort of hat or potentially braided hair on the top of her head. She is faceless and also does not have feet. Additionally, look at her arms. They're very small and spindly. They clearly do not accurately represent what this person's arms would look like if they were indeed molding this from a real model. And again, if these figurines did actually depict real people, why are they only latching onto the one that shows their body type when clearly there were so many other body types, right? We have the long and lanky, there's very thin, there are some that have very narrow waists, almost like today's like Barbie dolls. There are some that have very broad shoulders. They're all very different. And so it's interesting to me that they just kind of saw the one that they needed to make their argument and they just ran with it. And I love, love, love that they've latched onto this because it has the title of a Venus. And like I said, in Fearing the Black Body, she based most of her arguments around the fact that in Western art, as it developed on the historical side of things, right? So written record, Venuses were known for being plump. They were known for their fertility. And so fat activism has leaned very heavily into that. But the problem with that, when you're looking at a prehistoric piece, is that this piece was built tens of thousands of years before the concept of Venus came to exist. So we're using things that have now developed today to name an artifact that's much older, which naturally creates a bias within history. And so when you study history and you learn about biases, that's a lot of what they're talking about, is using today's knowledge to define things that happened in the past. And you're not supposed to do that. It's very frowned upon within the historical field. And yet and still it happens, right? A man discovered this figurine, decided to call it Venus. It was something about being improper, the first one that they found. Because by that point in time, religion had come to play more of a part, and so she was immodest because she was showing different parts of her body. So that person who discovered these original figurines has given them the title of Venus, even though, again, Venus didn't exist. Do you see what I'm saying? So it kind of creates a weird tension where we're defining these statuettes as having something to do with fertility and productivity, but we don't actually know that that's true. And history has only become more convoluted as social media continues to become popular, right? And that is something that I struggle with a lot as someone who absolutely loves history, is that literally any person can go and grab this image off of Google, like obese statue, pop it up on their TikTok and say that in some point in history, in yesteryear, right, that fatness was idolized. But the truth is, there's literally nothing that backs that up. But it doesn't matter to the person who saw that, had their own thought processes and opinions validated, and now they're going to just hold on to that little thing for as long as possible, even though it's completely false, right? That's the problem with social media. It has the ability to just create these false narratives so rapidly. And when I saw this figurine, I was like, there's literally no way I cannot talk about this on the channel because, you know, history, right? It's my thing. All right, before we end today's video, I just want to share this little tidbit that I found interesting. That is a reminder to me how cool it is to actually study history, because there are always these little things that reveal themselves that are really, really cool. So the thing that I found the most interesting specific to the Venus of Willendorf figurine that we've been talking about this video is that when they did a scan recently to figure out the type of limestone she was made from, they were able to tell that that specific limestone came from either Italy or Ukraine, but the statue itself was found in Austria, which means it's small stature, right? She's a very small statue, was meant to be held in a hand or carried. And so think about the context of that. These are hunter-gatherers, they're very nomadic people. These statues would have had to have real importance for them to continuously pack them up and move with them. It really makes me wish that we had some sort of written record to tell us what these cool little figurines were used for. All right, that is all I have for you guys today. I'm just curious, have you seen them holding on to this historical figurine? Have you seen them latching on to other relics of the past to promote fatness as an ideal beauty standard? I would love to know what you're seeing out there. And if you've made it to this point in the video, leave me some sort of emoji in the comments. Maybe a pyramid or some other like history emoji would be much appreciated. Thank you all so much for being here with me today. I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.